It's December 1st, and the holiday shopping season is well underway. And if it was December at any time between the early 70s and the early 2000s, you'd probably be at the mall right about now. After all, malls were the centerpiece of commerce and social life for many suburban communities during that time period. And whether or not they are still standing, their existence acts as great reflections of time and place. I was so happy to have my friend and frequent podcast collaborator, Kyle, join me once again on the EPS Podcast to talk about malls as primary sources, especially since together we frequented one in particular throughout the 1990s. So welcome back to the EPS Podcast, where everything is a primary source. I'm Eric Paul. You can find the show, well, you already found it if you're listening to it, but on all forms of podcasting sites, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the website, www.epspodcast.club, and on social media, especially on Instagram, that's where you'll find me. I'm joined today, once again, by Kyle Lincoln. He's my good friend from high school years, and actually even before that, right? We were on a basketball team back in like 7th grade.
Oh, yeah. Long time.
That was actually a pretty...
So many moons, I can't count them.
I think that was actually a pretty monumental year that we played basketball together, because we played for the YMCA, and that was in 1991 or 2, yeah, which was the centennial of basketball being introduced to the world, and at the YMCA. So, yeah, we were part of it. We didn't realize it at the time, even though our T-shirt said 100 years on it. But we're not here to talk today about... the YMCA or basketball. I guess we could, because everything is a primary source. But instead, we're going to be talking about something that I've been meaning to get around to for a while, and that would be the mall. And I know that there's so much there. We could really, and I think it's pretty obvious why malls were created in the first place and all that. But I think you and I are going to have
consumerism.
Yeah, but didn't they become so much more? Especially in the ages that we grew up in and around malls, 80s and 90s. By then, they had really kind of hit their stride. And sadly, we saw that as like the last, kind of like the pinnacle of their greatness. When you think of the mall, and they still exist, they're kind of deserted now, but when you think of the mall, what sights, sounds, smells comes to mind for you?
Well, the smell of the food court, right? Yep. Like all those different things going on. The sound of kids crying, kids laughing, parents screaming, people talking, people standing outside of stores screaming, "Hey, why don't you come buy this? We got a deal going on that." Or that one Asian restaurant that's handing out free samples as you walk by. It's like going to Sam's for lunch, right?
Right.
You gotta especially pass it a couple of times, get some teriyaki chicken, and you keep walking.
And then do a lap, and then come back and have a little bit more. And I'm pretty sure I did
take
that.
Take your hat off, so you.
Yeah. They wouldn't recognize you, because I know you and I sharing this, that we could and did spend all day on a Saturday at the mall.
Oh, absolutely. It was like we were part of a generation, right, where everybody claims that the TV was our babysitter. Right. Well, that might have been true during the week, but on the weekend, the mall was.
The mall. And I remember hitting that age, because I remember growing up, going to the mall, but parents were always there. But I remember like the first time, I was probably like 13 or 14, that they agreed to let me go off with my friends, or like I think they kind of weaned off of it by letting me and my older brother go down to like service merchandise to play the Super Nintendo that was set up there.
Yep.
And they knew it'd be occupied there, and we were like, oh great, free video games. And that little taste of freedom, being able to just go, because the mall was like, and it is like a insulated town, really, right? It has those elements to it, and so
it even has different members of society there,
right? And as time went on, they started to change. I think by the time we get to like the 2000s, early 2000s, I recognize a lot of malls started having really strict rules about kids under the age of 18 being there at a certain time because they're just having too many problems. But we might be getting too far ahead of ourselves. Now, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about it is because of your background in industrial and organizational psychology. And I feel like shopping centers, malls, and those kinds of worlds are kind of like, even if you didn't actually study them, somebody like you would have the insights on that more than most.
Wow. Yeah, I could translate that for you. Really, it was just, it threw me for a loop. I wasn't expecting that.
Well, this is what you should be expecting all the time.
I should expect the unexpected, especially when talking to you. Wow, the psychology of the mall is just crazy. So that was where you met your friends. That was where you met your peer groups.
Mm-hmm.
And if you weren't able to do that, boy, you were really missing out on something. And that could really kind of affect your status.
It was, yeah.
It with your friends and other people around the school, and with all the different cliques were there, sometimes you have to be a little sneaky about where you were going to go, right? Mm-hmm. You had to avoid people, right. Certain people, or duck into a store if you saw somebody coming, or, all those different things.
You just described like at least three. I can think of three specific times for each of those examples of like, because unlike school, so it was like school, but not school, because it wasn't just you and your peers that you went to school with that you would see there at the mall.
It was our social media.
It was, yeah. And in many ways, social media kind of killed the mall and
online shopping.
Right. Well, they worked together for a little while. Like I feel like in the early 2000s or so, when both, social media and, commercial internet were still kind of in that, figuring it out stage, they would oftentimes really kind of help promote mall behavior. They would have like flash sales, or they might, make it like the status symbol that you got the Victoria's Secret pink sweatpants, not me, but like, women before everybody else did. And you would have like Black Friday. You always get on Black Friday those images of people rushing into the malls or lined up outside of them and fighting over whatever was on sale at those places.
Baseball bats and tackling old ladies in the parking lot.
Yeah, and then it just kind of like died, just as people started to trust, Amazon and Walmart and eBay and Etsy and stuff more and more. They're like, I don't need to go to the mall. And teenagers were like, we don't need to go to the mall. We can just see each other on this thing. Like, it's not as, but you're right. For that generation, 80s and 90s kids, that satisfied that need to strut around, have, and it was great because it wasn't just your schoolmates. You would see kids from other schools, and there wasn't that degree of, oversight from parents or anything like that, or teachers, because the mall security didn't care. They weren't going to give you a hard time.
And as we got older and started getting jobs, that's where we would go. So and so's working at FYE today.
Right.
Oh, we're going to go hang out and say hi.
And that was definitely the status symbol there too. Was a mall job, because
I worked at the theater.
That's right. Yeah.
That we had there. It was Hoyt's Cinema at the time.
Not yet Regal.
It has now since become a Regal here. But my goodness, I could write a book or a movie about the stuff that we did at that theater.
And that was like the highest status in the mall too. Because even the layout of the place, and the mall that we're thinking of is Champlain Centers North in Plattsburgh, New York, right off of Interstate I-87.
Named so because we had a south. We actually had two malls. We had a good mall and a bad mall. The new mall and the old mall. The north mall and the south mall.
And
all the same thing.
If you're listening to this in anywhere in the United States, you can totally relate to that. That after a while,
it's the good mall and the bad mall. Don't go to that one. That one's got all the lame stores in it. It's like a little shadier than it used to be.
It's like Death Star
the
1
new
and
one,
Death Star 2.
The new mall, that's where it's at. It's got all the new stores, all the new stuff. It looks really cool, you know.
Grand Moff Tarkin is still at the small one. And, you know, you got the Emperor himself at the new one. And that's the movie theater is one of those things that could, you know, make the difference between the crappy mall and the good mall.
Yeah.
You know, because if they had the movie theater attached to it, that immediately improved the, you know, because more people are going to be going there.
Absolutely. Because I remember the old mall had a movie theater in it too.
It did?
But once it was right next to the Gold Mine Arcade. Anyway.
Cool.
But like when the new mall opened and that new theater came in, boy, people went to that one.
Yeah, because it was like a Cineplex. It had all these screens.
Yeah, and then that old mall theater closed.
So why don't we? Because you know we could easily just go on tangents about these little anecdotes, and they will be organized in such a way. I'm going to actually skip down on my primary source analysis form to the section that says where was it made and what locations are associated with it. And I think about all the malls that I've always either lived near, because I've lived in a couple different places, mostly in the Northeast, a little bit in the Mid-Atlantic, and almost by a rule, all the malls are near an interstate highway or another expressway of some sort. Yeah. And that makes perfect sense because
traffic.
Right. And the parking lots at those malls are so big. They could absorb, you know, the one that we used to go to all the time in Plattsburgh is about 15-minute drive from the Canadian border. So it was like in the age of commercial, you know, malls being a big commercial center. It was the most brilliant idea. No wonder there was 2 malls there. Should have been more because in the late 80s, early 90s, the Canadian dollar was pretty much at par with the US dollar, and all the taxes were so high in Canada that Canadians
they'd come buy it.
Yeah, they would save so much money.
They'd take it out of the packages or wear it if it was clothing, so they didn't have to pay tax on it and go back over the border.
Right, and they would save so much because even after a while when the dollar value changed, they were like, it still saves on all the taxes that I have to pay if I shopped in Canada. Mm-hmm. And you know, there's urban malls too, like you would find, you know, indoor shopping centers in big cities and stuff like that. But it seemed like the pretty standard design went right along with another product of the mid 20th century, the interstate highway, that these were not built in existing shopping areas, right? They were manufactured. So what does that tell you about the latter half of the 20th century with malls kind of springing up everywhere, but especially near those expressways?
Well, I think we've discussed this, I think, on a couple of the episodes at least that we've done together about that particular time frame being about excess and convenience and booming economy and me first kind of mentality. So like having one-stop shop, foot traffic, ease of location, I feel like that was it, right? Like, why do I want to drive to a bunch of different stores when I can drive to one place, park my car, and walk?
Yeah.
I think, I don't know if you've ever been, but the Mall of America in Minnesota.
I have not. I would like to.
Oh my God, it's huge. The last time I went there, we had the kids. We spent literally 10 hours there. It's 3 floors, that amusement park, some water slides and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But it's all right in the middle of the mall. Like, did I come here to shop? Or wait, there's roller coasters. Oh wait, there's a log loom ride. Okay, yeah, let's do that. Let's spend some time doing that. And then you shop again afterwards. And by the time you're done, you need a vacation from going to the mall. I don't want to jump the shark, but I heard that in North Rutherford, New Jersey, there is a new, even bigger mall being built now.
Really?
Which is surprising to me because malls are kind of going away.
Yeah.
But maybe this is a revival. But I looked it up, and this mall is being called a luxury shopping mecca.
Oh,
now when I think mecca, I think that's a holy trip, right?
Right. Yeah.
But this thing's got the mall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then it's got an amusement park, a water park, 3 mini golf courses.
Wow.
And indoor skiing, snow,
of course,
inside, ice rink, aquarium, and get this, a hotel
inside the mall.
At the mall.
You know, somebody's telling me about. I think in Memphis, Tennessee, the Bass Pro Shop there has something similar where you can actually stay in a cabin in the store.
That's crazy.
And it's like you just when you think that we're moving away from that as a society, whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, like
here comes this plane. It sounds like somebody like dusted. It was like 2001, and they put that plan away, and then like forgot about it for a while, and then like, hey,
I think it's smart because the mall has been slowly disappearing.
Yeah.
Now a lot of malls have closed across the country and become dilapidated.
Urban explorers.
And they become urban explorer sites, or indoor skate parks or things of that nature. So it's just funny to see, hey, well, somebody out there is trying to revive this wonderful piece of our culture.
When you were describing all the things in there and then what's also in the Mall of America, it brought back ideas to me that I think by the late 90s, when it seemed like this was just going to be, every malls were it, that's how people are going to, that every mall in the country would be at least a microcosmic version of that it wouldn't just be shopping. It wouldn't just be the food court. Even a movie theater would be kind of bland, that every mall would have some level of, other recreation entertainment because of what they had become. And, a lot of them were filling the gaps of where people were living and working. There were sections of towns that didn't have a commercial sector. And so it was like, okay, let's make this, and like you said before with automobiles, let's make this the destination and you'll spend the day there and you're not just going to, and after a while you might get bored, with the shopping part. And I mean, how many, especially guys, it seems like a guy thing, like I just get in and get out. I don't need to, lollygag. The best
they ever did to shopping is include bars.
Yeah.
Husbands can sit down and have a beer and say, go ahead, honey, go do your shopping. I'm going to sit right here. You don't have to look for me. You know where I am.
Yeah. My dad did that with coffee. Yeah, he always liked the coffee shops, and he would just sit there and he's like, I don't feel like walking the mall and dealing with all the stuff I don't want to deal with. So I'll just, and more time, most of the time, if I was there with just my family, I would just join them and like have a hot chocolate or something and just sit there and kind of people watch, because it was great people watching at the mall. Yeah. And especially
Green Mountain Coffee Roasters.
That's the one. Yeah. It smelled so good there and everything.
Which at one point was next to a Hooters.
Yeah, that was in Hooters. So now we can go back up the top of the, what materials it made from. I feel like early on malls were just kind of like, hey, let's take every store that exists and, an appliance store. Let's take that, keyboard and organ store and, a men's attire and Florsheim and all these, existing Main Street type stores and just stick them in the mall because we need something to fill space. But after a while, Then came a number of mall, stores that were tailor made for the mall. Like Victoria's Secret. I seem hung up about that, but I just watched a documentary about it. So was one of those, stores. Abercrombie and Fitch was one of those stores. Aeropostale, all those. They weren't.
That was the one that was so dark that you couldn't see.
It was one of them.
Costed by clone or
Hollister was another one too. Yeah,
Hollister,
yeah, that was the one that you'd walk by and just get hit with like a wave of, and that for me was like, that was towards the tail end of when I was interested in going to a mall. It was like right around when those stores started showing up, and but so those kinds of places never had a standalone store. It wasn't like they brought them in from the outside. So like the 70s, 80s, 90s, that's like the heyday of the mall when they start putting stores in there that are just for those places. They're designing them all with the anchor stores and they're in mind. JCPenney's, Sears,
Montgomery Ward's.
Yeah. Isn't it funny that Montgomery Ward's is one of those old department stores that got brought back into the mall age, and by the time that you get to that age, they were kind of like the dumpy store. They weren't that good.
Right.
And so Montgomery Ward's is one of them, but the other one is Woolworth. Woolworth
that was more of a strip mall,
right? They were rarely in the regular malls, but they owned Champ Sports. I remember when I learned that, because
which was a mall staple.
Yeah, it was a mall staple, and it was like only in the mall, and it was like the glory of the mall. You walk in there, you feel like they had like the scoreboard like you'd see at an NBA game, hanging down, and you're like, wow, this is serious stuff. Move over, Foot Locker. Champ Sports is here, or if you're in New England, Olympia Sports, it's basically the same thing. So yeah, you had all those kinds of places, and that's like, what does that inform you about, 70s, 80s, and 90s, that the businesses, the companies are making stores specifically for the mall, like they couldn't exist anywhere else?
That's the wave of the future, right? Malls are the wave of the future. And if people are going to go to the mall, if we try to start this new standalone store and don't put it in a mall, we might not survive.
Right.
We might not get that foot traffic. Again, fast pace, buy now, charge it now, pay it later, all that kind of stuff. If you wanted people to come into your store and spend money, you needed the most amount of people possible. That's what it was going to be. It's going to be the mall.
And I honestly can't think of any of those stores that didn't have a charge card either, their own specific charge card.
No, they all had their own charge card. What was great is when you had stores like the Gap and Old Navy and all those different stores, they were all owned by the same parent company.
Yeah.
So you could use your Gap card at Old Navy and vice versa.
I was an Old Navy, I was an ensign in the Old Navy, and worked my way up to Admiral. No, but I was in Old Navy, and
I never worked there. Did they actually have ranks?
I wish. I'm just putting that on them. I don't think maybe
that would have been cool.
I would have been so much more into it if we could like have promotion ceremonies and stuff, and like.
But you worked there during the ska like jive era of Old Navy and Gap, right? And people wearing khakis and white shirts and dancing around
that time, because I still hear songs on the radio now and then that I'm like, that's an Old Navy song. Some like loud disco song. They would change, and that was actually part of our training. They told us during the training, they're like, studies show that obnoxiously loud music makes people buy faster. And as a psychologist, is that true? I mean, is that something that actually, because it gets in your brain?
It's not necessarily just songs. It's certain songs, right? Certain kinds of music, certain smells. And that's why that store, what we were just talking about, is it Abercrombie and Fitch?
Yeah, and Hollister and Paxson.
Hollister. That's why they did what they did, right? So they wanted everybody to look a certain way, act a certain way. And so if the lights were down low, you couldn't hear what people were saying, and all you could smell was this this scent that was pouring through their store, that's what you wanted. You wanted to fit that image, and so you bought their clothes. So yeah,
and I used to get a kick out of, because you were saying before about how Gap and Banana Republic and Old Navy are all part of the same company. That because we had a Gap right next to Old Navy at the mall, and on more than one occasion, somebody get frustrated they couldn't find what they were looking for at Old Navy, like, and they would say it loud enough so that, like, us, the clerks, could hear it. Like, I'm just going to go over to the Gap and see if they have what I'm looking for. And
thank you for your business.
I'm like, you know what it says on my paycheck? Because it says the Gap. So, Gap Incorporated. So yeah, either way, I don't care. That was always kind of funny to me. So, like, yeah, you worked at the movie theater. I worked at Old Navy at some point. And, so working in the mall, you got some of those inside secrets in a way. Like, this is how, this is why we exist. This is how, I remember the training. I hope I'm not going to get sued by Old Navy for giving this away, but, we had our training video where they compared our store to like a supermarket. They said when somebody comes into a supermarket, they are usually going to buy milk and bread. And, the way a supermarket is designed is to try to get people to buy more than just milk and bread.
So you put it at the back.
Right. Put it so you have to go wander through all the snack cakes and all the produce and all the other stuff. And your brain's going to tell you, oh, yeah, you might want that. Oh, you need that. And so our thing was jeans and T-shirts, maybe, I think was their other staple item, and khakis and stuff like that. And again, the whole wall of jeans was in the back of the store. And then as you're going to, and like, we want, an average of 5 items to be walking out the store with every customer. I'm like, man, I always thought as a customer, as a, mall rat, as, just kind of wandering around, I'm like, no wonder they get annoyed when kids, teenagers especially, just wander into a store, goof off for a while, buy nothing, and then leave. Like, of course they're annoyed because every time, because the store is getting judged by their higher ups. Every time somebody walks through and the laser gets, counts them, beep, 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 you're on the clock, and like, okay, this person ought to leave with at least 5 things, or else we're going to hear about it and our hours are going to get cut if we're not making it, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, oh, this is actually a serious thing. But yeah, without mall culture, I don't think any of those things would have ever come up.
No.
So, who made the mall? I think there's a couple of big companies that are responsible. Wow. Pyramid was a company that made a lot of malls.
And that's who was our malls.
Yeah. They were like a big company that put them out. I'm not, a total expert on this subject. And that's kind of the beauty of this particular show, is that we just kind of, deduce things. But I have a feeling that a lot of the mall, and I'll put it like this, like kind of like new money, it wasn't like the old timey, traditional business people that a lot of like post World War II self-made businessmen are the ones who conceived the mall. And it wasn't like,
and they were getting all the old money to come to the mall.
Right. They were, Sears and JCPenney.
Yeah, all those different things. Yeah.
Because I'm not even sure if those places did. I mean, they existed, and Sears has been around for a long time before malls existed, and especially the catalog. Yeah. And for a short while, there was those kinds of stores, and I used to love them. I thought they were so cool. That was like a combination of two. Service merchandise was one of them, where they had the catalog in the store. And there was another one called just like Consumers or something like that. And they didn't even have like an actual retail floor. Like they had just a wall of catalogs that you could flip through. You fill out a card and bring it up to them. And then I used to love it when
they had it in the store, it would come down the conveyor belt.
Yeah, it was so cool. It was like, which is kind of like where we've now come around to, where that's how everything that we get comes down. We don't get to see it, but Amazon hubs all throughout the country, they're filling orders the exact same way.
Yeah.
So it was making a new class of, multimillionaire real estate giants and moguls and stuff, which also is consistent with the time period where, especially that World War II generation, those veterans who came back from the war and with new experience on how to, and reinvigorate. They had this huge economy just waiting for them. I don't think it's any wonder that the first indoor mall opened in 1956, almost exactly 10 years after, the country's, kind of like recovering from all the war and the golden age is upon us. So it makes total sense to us. But considering I can't really name any of them by first name, it tells us something about their status in society, right?
I would imagine
that we're not really like, well, because like I could name you Donald Trump as a real estate, guy. I think he's done other stuff too, but like, as far as like, yeah, he built, this hotel or that casino, or he owned this, the plaza for a while, or all these in Atlantic City and all, he built the Central Park ice rink and all that. But I couldn't name you any of the mall people. It's just kind of like behind the scenes. And that's even the feeling that you got in the mall. Like you're walking around, but you kind of felt like you're being watched by somebody. I always pictured a bunch of guys in suits sitting in some like back office area with like, either a two-way mirror or
Russians.
Kind of like in Stranger Things. Yeah.
Stranger Things. Yeah.
That makes me think a lot, I'm like, oh, maybe this whole time.
But Stranger Things, I think, was a really good kind of homage to that feeling of being a kid and going to the mall. And I think they represented it really, really well, while also showing the darker side of things, right? Mom and pop stores closing, but that having to take a bus to get there because it wasn't just down the street. It had to be at a central location, like you were saying. So it's kind of nice. All the colors.
They did a nice job with that. And you're right. Everything was nice and they did a nice job of showing it in its prime when everything was glossy and clean and brand new, because, certainly by the, about 20 years ago, things are getting dingy and falling apart and things like that.
All told, shopping malls did not have a very long life as Americans' first choice for their shopping experience. While some are still doing okay, and apparently others are going forward with development as we speak, attitudes towards malls, their culture, atmosphere, and store offerings have shifted dramatically over the last few decades. And, as usual, when talking about anything post-1995, the internet receives the blame or credit, depending on how you want to look at it. Why put up with the hassle of fighting traffic, looking for parking, walking all over the place, all while dealing with quote-unquote mall rats, if you can just order from the comfort of your home or off your phone? But this is not to say that malls did not have and do not still have their place. They supplied a town center for communities that didn't have one. Malls provided a one-stop destination for all things pop culture. Everything this podcast covers could be found at a mall at one time or another. And if nothing else, malls are great specimens to study a bygone but much beloved era.
So I feel like we touched on it a little bit before as to why did they make it, and I suppose if we had chosen one specific mall to investigate, but I want to ask you more about that one in East Rutherford, New Jersey. It's coming out.
Okay.
Do you want to speculate further as to why now they're deciding to go? Are they? Do you think they're hoping to reach into the nostalgia for people of our age group? Because I personally don't think I'm going to be. I'm not nostalgic for malls as much as they might think we would be.
Right. Well, I can speculate, perhaps, that maybe they were ready to do this years ago, but COVID.
Yeah.
Right? And I imagine that the state is probably invested in this in some way. And it's probably good traffic for the state, good consumer. It's conveniently located between New York and New Jersey. And, my understanding is correct. The boardwalk down there, Atlantic City, all that stuff has kind of taken a little bit of a dip too. And what's the word? Attendance, I guess, is the word I'll use.
It's just funny to me, though, because it just seems like a big risk to take, because it seems like malls had their chance and they just didn't make it. I think about two examples. One was in Syracuse, New York. They have Destiny USA. And right around the turn of the century, it was already a pretty big mall. It was about, you would consider it a big mall by anybody's. And they were like, this is going to be the biggest mall in America. We're going to build it up. We're going to have all the same kind of stuff that you listed off. They're going to have like an indoor park. And it made sense in a place like Syracuse. And like the very first mall to open up, indoor mall, was outside of Minneapolis. And that's where the Mall of America is too. These northern, cold 9 months out of the year type places to get people from, you get to have the pedestrian shopping experience without being outside or affected by anything. But it never panned out the way they wanted to be. They always had to cut corners. And then I think the last time that I was there was probably about 10 years ago, and it looked like any other mall. It was the same kind of thing. And then the other example that comes to mind was last year, and I realized COVID had its effects, but I was over at the mall that's right by the Tappan Zee Bridge in New York, and I think it's called the Palisades Mall. And that one is another like grand titan feeding off of that New York City, customers and, patrons, because it's just it's like 25 minutes north of Manhattan. And you have like you could see it from the highway. It's right next to the highway. These gigantic stores. And to me, it couldn't have been almost kind of sad. There was inside the parking lot, and like surrounded by parking lot and surrounded by mall, is this African-American cemetery. It was like the black cemetery for throughout the 19th century. And there's a number. And so like, I guess and I think it was Pyramid Company went to go build the mall, they offered to pay to exhume, take all the coffins up and relocate it. And the families involved in the cemetery are like, no, we'll stay. And it's funny because like as you're walking around, it's a really beautiful cemetery. It has like and it's like on this huge sloping hill, and has like a lot of Civil War veterans are there, and it's like really, but then if you just take a look in any direction, it's like gross parking lot. Here's an old, Dick's Sporting Goods and all this stuff that is just like, okay, it's like that last scene in Gangs of New York where everything's just kind of like grown up around it. And we were there on Columbus Day weekend. And again, I know COVID and all that, but traditionally, that's one of those big weekends. It's early in the school year, long weekend, lots of sales. Nobody was there. And they even had like a comedy club inside. They had like Blue Man Group was there. They had like Stomp or whatever, all these like shows. It was like this huge. It was so much more than a mall, and nobody was there. And so
and to your point, like why now for this? It's called. If you're listening to this, and I know they're not owners, it's called American Dream. Okay, promoting your mall, but really, I think what they're thinking is this is a mall, right? We're going to sell that nostalgia piece of the word mall.
Yeah.
But based on what's there, I think shopping is an afterthought.
Right. That's like what you do when you're tired from all the other stuff.
Yeah. it's kind of like going to Vail, right? We're going to go skiing. Oh, they have some shops there.
Yeah.
We're going to go to an amusement park, water park, golf, all this other stuff. Oh, yeah, by the way, we can shop. So I think maybe why now? That would probably be my why now. Like, yeah, we can make money from all this other stuff that's in here. And, we'll make money from stores wanting to be here too.
Right. I'm curious if it's the same kind of stores that have always been in malls, or if they're going to try. Because I've noticed that the malls that are being built now, and they still do make some, but they tend to be, every store has an outdoor access that you don't have to go into a larger building just to get to the store you want to get to, that they all have an egress to the parking lot. And so you can do that one-stop shopping and
your
not
Targets,
have to.
Your Best Buys, your Kohl's.
Yeah, Michael's and Dick's and
Hobby Lobby.
Right. All those kinds
we better get something for all this promotion that we're doing.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, dozens of people are listening over the span of a year, so I'm sure.
Let's go to the mall.
Well, that's another thing too. So I know that like Robin Sparkles from How I Met Your Mother was the Canadian version of Tiffany, but Tiffany, my first crush, or among them, like, is like her and what's her face from Who's the Boss, but I was like, that's how she became a pop star, was touring malls. She was like 15, 16 years old and was doing a cover of Tommy James and the Shondells, I Think We're Alone Now. And like that whole music video is just shots of her in the mall, different malls in the country. And it was obvious that like maybe some of them came because there's a pop concert in the cafe, in the food court, but other people are just like walking through the mall like, hey, what the hell, like,
well, I think back to all those talent shows and beauty pageants that took place in the mall, and people are just walking by going, Christ, that person can't sing, and I gotta listen to that while I'm shopping, like
or celebrity appearances and stuff, like, or they would have all that in the mall, and that was like the and I think
Star Search with Ed McMahon, they would start in the mall, and then they would move up in competition until they got on TV. Yeah.
Same thing with the America's Funniest Home Video knockoff, or I guess child of America's Funniest People. I remember them having a special event at that mall that we grew up at, where they were looking for people with weird, funny talents and stuff like that, and they had a camera crew. And Double Dare came to the mall once I was a kid, and it wasn't the full show. They just had it was a promotional thing because they knew the kids were there. They knew that families were there, and there was just like a way to reach them and to get to them. And I think that's what these new mall makers are hoping for, because as I walk through, and just as a side note, I have a young son, so I'm not just walking through the toy section of Walmart on my own, but not only are they reviving a lot of the toys from the 80s and the early 90s, but they're reviving the packaging too. Masters of the Universe looks identical in the packaging that it did. Yeah, they're bringing those back as well. And it's like, it couldn't be any more obvious, because they're like, those are the parents nowadays. And if they're going to be parting ways with their money, it's going to be something they're familiar with. So I'm kind of guessing that this huge investment of building a mall mall in name only. So it's a Mino.
It's a mecca.
Yeah.
It says a luxury shopping mecca.
They use that word so loosely, don't they?
They do. Well, it is in the East.
Because I feel like the Great Recession really killed that shopping, like, I'm a shopaholic kind of culture, didn't it? Like about 15 years ago, it seemed like that was when everybody was clipping coupons and joining, Costco's and Sam's Clubs and trying to stretch their dollar like crazy. And it looks like we're heading into that realm again, even if it's just a lighter way right now in 2022, that it seems like just like an odd time to, bring shopping and American dream together into one place. But I remember there's a movie that came out poor timing. There was a couple of them that were really poor timing. Both the Confessions of a Shopaholic and Sex and the City Part 2, which I had to see in the theater. Not
Sex
I didn't
and the
I
City.
right sex and whatever it is. I don't say it like I had to see it in the theater. I was meeting my wife. She didn't realize I was on a job interview actually, and I just finished up and I was trying to find her, and she was just going into the theater. So my choices were either wander around a desolate mall for 2 hours or join her at the movie and at least, sit there through a story. And I had to watch Sex and the City Part 2 for its entirety. I was like, oh, but those movies came out, they couldn't have been at a worse time because 2007, 2008, the economy was down. It was in the dumps. People were losing their jobs. They, losing their homes. And yet they come out with these movies where, like I just shop too much and I just, I've maxed out all my credit cards and I just want more and more and more. And, I'm going to take this lavish vacation and, and it's just like totally unrelatable. And so I feel like that's, I don't know. I wish this American Dreams Mall the best, I guess, but it just seems like they might be trying to do more.
To revive all those movies that promoted it back when we were younger, right? In the 80s and that. And you got Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Clueless, even the Blues. Like one of my favorite things in a good movie is a car chase inside the mall.
Yeah.
Right? Like the Blues Brothers. Or outside the mall in the parking lot, like Back to the Future. Like malls were just there. They were part of the scenery. They were part of everything.
Yeah. Not only were they an option for us on a Saturday in, any time of the year, but especially when it was bad weather out, like, oh, we can do this, or the mall, or do all these things at the mall. But yeah, the settings for so many movies, you didn't even think a second of it. It was like, all those, I can think of 3 Arnold Schwarzenegger movies right now that have some kind of mall
Terminator 2, Cobra, or Commando.
Commando.
Commando. Cobra was Stallone.
Yeah. Commando and Kindergarten Cop all have, and I think it was the same mall too.
Yeah, Jingle All the Way.
Yeah, that's another one. So 4. Yeah. And that one's in Mall of America.
Yeah.
Bring
it all back.
And so it's a given. Like, any movie in that time period that even remotely needs like a setting with lots of people and, imagining it like getting all smashed up through like a chase or a fight or something like that. The mall, right? Because everybody goes to the mall and it was always kind of weird watching movies like that in the mall. Because then, you leave the movie, you're like, wait a minute, am I gonna do this now, or see it?
Like Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah, that's another one too. Because I think that when the original Dawn of the Dead came out, that was a total commentary of where we're going.
Right, and then by 2004, when the new one
remake came out, really I'm like, I've been to that mall.
The mall is dead.
And I saw that one actually. It was kind of funny because I saw the remake or the whatever, the update at a standalone theater, like a more traditional, center of town type theater. And I was kind of like laughing to myself because I'm like, so this is set in a mall and I'm already moving away from the mall. Like I could have seen this. I saw plenty of movies in that era at malls. But by that point, I'm like, I live too far away from a mall. I'm not going to go all the way there just to watch a movie. And so it couldn't have worked better. But and I'm glad you brought that up because that movie, definitely by the second one, it's like, that's how it is now. Like these things are desolate. Nobody's here, and the people that still come to malls are basically zombies because they're just kind of in the mall walkers. But, that's mean. But, well, that's how a lot of them became that way after a while too. Is it's like they kept them open because you have
indoor exercise for the elderly,
aging, a population that's getting older.
Yes, I suppose that's more
and living longer than ever before. So like the boomers and the greatest generation before them were like getting older and staying healthier longer. They might owe some of that at least to mall walking, because it was a perfect setting. You could get lots of steps in. They could measure their exact mileage if they did. And completely
it was good socialization too, because when you were taking a break, you would sit down and have your coffee or whatever in the food court, and you'd all chat together.
Yeah, I when I worked in the mall, I remember like in the early mornings when we had our and we had to do our deliveries or not deliveries, but we'd receive the truck would come in. It was I'd be there at 6 a.m. and there was already mall walkers. They didn't care about the stores. The stores meant nothing to them. The only ones they cared about were the coffee shops or any place, the Burger Kings or the Auntie Anne's that would sell the coffee as they went around.
Yeah, and they knew when the stores opened, that was time for them to leave.
Exactly. That was the end of their day. They were just like, all right, off to bed. And so it's funny because the intended audience or user has, companies will always try to nail their target audience as best they can. But it seems like we, the people ourselves, have made that determination over the years for them. Mm-hmm. We're the ones saying, no, like, I don't want to shop here anymore. Like you mentioned earlier, I recall when it was so early on that they actually called it e-shopping. When we'd have our morning meetings at the store, the managers would always talk about the sales that we did, and depending on the season, they're like, okay, cyber sales or e-sales are starting to go up, so we really need to push, whatever. Like they're like, we really, and it was so funny to me because I was like, who shops online? In 2002 or whatever. I'm like, and especially clothes. My clothes are going to be here, in stores forever because you can try them on. You don't have to. But now, I mean, it's people still they'll order clothes easily off the internet.
You can rent clothes now.
Yeah, it's crazy. Stitch Fix.
Like, I just need this outfit for the evening, and I'll send it back tomorrow.
I used to call that the Walmart lender service. I would. Listeners, you shouldn't do this, but I would wear something with the tag on still, and then since they were so liberal with their returns, like, yep, I'm done. I don't need these Wranglers anymore, or Rustlers or whatever. So the intended audience, it's like it's almost after a while that the malls were like 2 steps behind. Yeah. They were, and it's like teenagers. Yeah, they're always going to be there because they have nowhere else to go. And they're the main employees of the mall. Like they're going to keep it afloat.
It's kind of like what happened with everything. Like as our generation got older, the need for what we found entertaining wasn't entertaining anymore.
Yeah.
We talk about the mall now, but it could be applied to just about anything, like Blockbuster.
Right. No need for that.
No, now we have Netflix or streaming. It's the hardest thing in the world to explain to my daughter that what commercials are.
Right. They get frustrated when they call.
Oh my God, why so many commercials? And I'm like, back in my day, 1 hour of television had 28 minutes of commercials.
And it's so funny because we got in such a way about that we would like quote commercials to each other. We still have our favorite commercials. Like I could be like, I could tell you like, yeah, those kinds of things. Or like the like I used to love all Little Caesars commercials. I thought they were great.
Yeah,
like the baby flying around the house with the cheese, sticking out, and being pulled by the dog or whatever. I thought those are fantastic. And just like the mall, they used to pour, and even MTV would music companies, because MTV didn't air those, they didn't pay for them. They would, they'd be put on there for free. They would invest, the budgets of a pretty substantial movie after a while into making those music videos. I've been watching, on YouTube music videos now, and they're so low budget. Even like the top stars have these like very simple videos again, because they're like, nobody's watching MTV. Like nobody's even watching this on YouTube. And so it's the same kind of thing. Those mall stores used to go out of their way. Like I was mentioning Champ Sports before, even the video game arcades, they would have, that was the place that you'd see the latest games. And the home version was just a crappier knockoff of what was, the arcade was the only place you could get those kind of games. And now it's just like,
we had to buy our starters jackets.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Those with the different color pocket and
the hood, they were pullover coats with the zipper and your team logo on the back.
You had access to the BX on the base, right?
Yes.
Because they had so for people listening, if you're a military brat, you know the AFES stores, the BX for the Air Force and the PX for the Army, but they had their own brands. They had Athletic Club was the name of the shoes and the shirts and the hats. But after a while, they must have gotten some kind of contract with Starter but they only had certain jackets, like those very famous 1991 era, hooded, pullover jackets were the thing, but they didn't. So you could always tell a base kit because they didn't have a Cowboys or a Bulls pullover.
They were rocking a Hornets one.
Yeah, Hornets or a Starter. And that was it. Yeah. And that's like pre-Alonzo Mourning and Larry Johnson. So it was like you knew that they were, like, who's the Hornets? Like, is that a college team? Like, it didn't, nobody knew the Charlotte Hornets at all. And so that was like the status symbol that would indicate, I have access to, but it's the lower end version of it. So maybe you can shed some light on the last question or so, the ideas and behavior this conveys. You mentioned at the beginning, from an industrial organizational psychologist standpoint, malls come in different shapes and sizes. I used to like the ones that were, more than one floor, because I would ride the escalator. That kid's on the escalator.
On the escalator. I was waiting for that mall rat. Mall rat.
And that's another, because that movie doesn't work unless you're familiar with the different, because there's a second mall in that too. They go to the Krabby Mall, the flea market mall. But the layout of these places.
Schooner is a sailboat.
Does he call me like stupid? Or
you know what? There is no Easter Bunny. Thank you, Kevin Smith. Thank you, Kevin Smith.
So is there, the layouts of them, they come in different shapes and sizes and, stuff like that. But are they all essentially trying to go with the same thing of like, because some of the malls had like the fake plants inside, so you're like, oh, I'm outside but I'm inside.
I don't know how much of an IO perspective I can give on that, but there's definitely a psychological marketing, advertising, and things like that. They're all set up the same way. They may not necessarily have the stores in the same places. One might have a Victoria's Secrets. I did that. It
keeps coming up,
on the left side of the mall. One might have it on the right side of the mall. One might have it on the first floor. One might have it on the second floor. But they're gonna try to lump these things all together, and they're not gonna. They're all the big stores that people wanted to go to, right? Like the anchor stores, we call them. We call them anchor stores for a reason. They weren't all together. They were on the north, south, east, and west side of the building, so that you could put all the other stores in between, so that the people that wanted to go to just those anchor stores had to walk by all these other places to do it. Now, typically, I've seen it more often than not that the food court is somewhere centrally located in the mall, so that the smell goes everywhere. The mall that we grew up going through had it on one end of the mall.
Yeah, that was odd.
But it was also one of the only major entrances to the mall too. And it was on the anchor. They're all kind of set up in a way, like you said, with the grocery store, right? We want to get people to go here, go there, so they've got to pass through all this other stuff first. And that just ties right into the psychology behind advertising and subliminal messages and hidden agendas. And it's almost October, so I'll throw up one of my favorite October time movies, They Live, right?
Yes, yeah.
So obey, shop, spend.
the anti-Ghostbusters. It's like, instead of small businessmen, fighting against the government, it's about anti-consumerism, and all these people everywhere are, the special glasses tell you who's, good and who's not. I think about, it sounds like a lot of this might be mall bashing, but I do have some very, very, strong memories, good memories about being at the mall, especially certain times of the year. There's nothing like a mall in their glory days around Christmas time.
If any of this came off like sounding like mall bashing, I think we need to like do a second episode to make sure that people don't feel that way. 'Cause
yeah,
I think I can't speak for you, even though I think I can. Malls have a warm spot for me in my nostalgia pocket and my heart. Not to the point where I'm going to go spend my time and money traveling to see the new American Dream. Although if I wanted to, there's a hotel I could stay there. But I loved the mall growing up.
Yeah,
it's ingrained in everything that was part of my time frame.
Yeah,
my generation growing up, and so we loved the mall.
Yeah, and it's if we could go back to, and so I think if we could go back to the mall in its heyday, like there's nothing better on like a winter, February and a Tuesday night, and your parents are like, I don't feel like cooking tonight. How about we just do the food court? You're like, okay, so cozy. Everybody, here's $5. Go to Taco Bell, or you go over to Sbarro, and I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. Actually, it sounds corny, but one of my all-time like favorite memories is from when my now wife and I were first going out. Was like it was like around Christmas time, probably a week or two before Christmas, and we went Christmas shopping for our families at the big mall in Syracuse. And it was like we just found like thing after thing at store after store that was like perfect, and then we like timed it just right. We went and sat down and had some coffee, and she had like a big hot cocoa, and it was just like those nice smells wafting around, and it was like kind of crowded but not really, so it was like a pleasant steady stream of people, and everybody was laughing, and you hear the Christmas carols in the background, being in all the decorations everywhere, and there's kids lined up for Santa down the way. And then I think we ended the night as we oftentimes did by going to see a movie. I think we saw Love Actually that night, which is a great movie, and it was like the perfect early 2000s, like to me that was like the last hurrah of the mall for me. Like I was like, that was it for me. Like I could never return to that. That was the pinnacle, the apex for the mall's era, because after that it seemed like every time I went to a mall, it couldn't match that because it wasn't Christmas anymore, but it also just wasn't, it had other things to compete with. It just wasn't quite the same way. So
and now malls are an episode of something on the History Channel, something that our kids will never really truly experience the way that we did.
Not the same way. I brought my son to the mall last year for Santa Claus, and it just wasn't. It didn't stick with him. I don't think. I mean, he enjoyed taking a picture with Santa through like a weird glass because of COVID stuff. But like,
and now it's like, can we go now? Like,
he's never asked to go to the mall. Like I used to beg. I even went to the mall. The president of the United States used to routinely come to the Air Force Base where I grew up, because he had it was President Bush, and so he had a second home in Kennebunkport, Maine, and he would come to the Air Force Base like once a month. We'd go see the leader of the free world. And I remember one time I was so obsessed with a video game at the Dream Machine arcade at the mall that I was like begging my mom. I was like, come on, I want to see, can we just leave now? And like, there's the president of the United States waving from and I'm like, all right, we can go now, right? Because I want to play Ninja Turtles. And I was so, the mall took precedence over the president. So like that, if it sounds like we're kind of like, oh, stupid malls, we're not. They are a great document, like you just said, of an era, not really even just 1 year, but of an era of
multiple decades.
Yeah, they are a perfect representation, and not just urban explorers.
Half a century at least.
Yeah, that was, and in our time, that's an eon. That's like a really that's a long time on the throne. So, Kyle, thanks for joining the EPS podcast again. Always great conversations. And
I love getting together with you, Eric.
This is, I could throw out any topic, and I'm pretty sure you and I would have a great time talking about it and seeing how it crossed our paths and brought us together in some way or another. So, think about another one we can do, and definitely we'll fit it in there.
Absolutely.
And for all you listeners out there, this is gonna be airing right around Thanksgiving, Black Friday, so you might be going to a mall.
You'll be going to the mall.
Keeping you company as you're waiting at 4 a.m. for a store to open or something like that. But
that's an episode in itself.
Yeah, that Black Friday alone is enough to do one. But thank you again for joining and for listening, everybody out there, the EPS Podcast. And we'll talk to you next time on the EPS Podcast, where everything, including malls, are a primary source.
We are just about halfway through the second season of the EPS Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed listening to what you've heard so far. Full-length episodes like this one have been delivered on Thursdays, while shorter episodes, the products of my EPS Podcast live exhibits, come out on Tuesdays. If you like what you hear, consider becoming a patron by going to patreon.com/EPS Podcast. Follow the show on social media, including YouTube and especially Instagram. I look forward to you tuning in again to the EPS Podcast, where everything is a primary source.